we are greeted with the sight of a man with a scarred face. He wore a dark, solemn expression as the shadow of the night sky covered his face. The man's identity is the Baskerville family's hound, Victor Van Baskerville. Beneath the luminous gaze of the moon, a chilling tableau unfolded. The stark silhouette of a guillotine emerged, its dark frame standing tall against the night. Victor Van Baskerville, the man in question, lay upon the wooden platform. Flanking him on either side were two figures, their visages masked by shadows. The loyal hounds, who had faithfully served his family and father, shared a revelation that shattered his world. They spoke of a deceitful plot, falsely charging him and framing him for associating with the demon clan. This unjust accusation led him to face the guillotine, standing at its merciless mercy. In that grim moment, a profound decision took hold. If he were to be granted another chance at life, he resolved that he would no longer accept the role of a submissive hound. Instead, once he captured the elusive rabbit, his symbolic prey, he would embrace a different path, one free from the chains of servitude. In the next moment, he was greeted with the familiar scene of the moonlight's glow. However, this time, he found himself not upon the same wooden platform where he had faced execution, but instead inside an unfamiliar room. His body felt heavy and the surroundings were filled with noise. He also recalled that he should have died, leading him to ponder the possibility that he might be in hell. As the crying got louder, a man went inside the nursery room. He walked through the aisle of cradles, stating that there doesn't seem to be any special children from the bunch, and that he thinks only trash were gathered there this time. As then, his attention was attracted by something peculiar. Narrowing his eyes, he saw that one baby wasn't crying like the rest. Immediately afterwards, he ordered the maids to move the children to a place called the Cradle of Swords. Little did he know that strange baby was Victor Van Baskerville, the same person who was executed and has regressed to the past and became a baby. A fire ignited inside Victor as he saw the man. That's because the man in question was the main culprit for his framing and execution. The Baskerville family's patriarch, Hugo Le Baskerville. Hugo looked very different, as in the past, he was very old and had grayish-white hair. However, Victor was certain that this was Hugo's younger appearance, and thus his suspicions that he has regressed to when he was a baby was confirmed. Victor had lived his previous life as a lowly hound, born into an illegitimate family and raised in a harsh and impoverished environment. In this world, a hound's purpose was to carry out any task assigned to them: assassination, gathering intelligence, launching ambushes, or instilling fear in the enemies of the Baskerville family, the most prestigious among the 7 families. Despite the hardships, Victor remained fiercely loyal for a singular reason. He had devoted himself to this role, enduring the gritty and unsavory aspects of his duties, all in the hope of being acknowledged and embraced by the family that had forever shaped his existence. 10 years had passed since the gate to the demonic realm first swung open. After a decade-long battle against demons, humans emerged victorious. However, the loyal hound, who had faithfully served the family, faced a grim fate. Rather than being rewarded, he was condemned to death. The reason for his execution was simply because he knew too much. His unyielding dedication had exposed him to secrets, whispers, and conspiracies that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the family's power. And thus, he clenched his fist and vowed that this time, he will never live that kind of life again. He wants to take his revenge right now, but with a newborn's body, that's currently impossible. But he heard from Hugo that he's being moved to the Cradle of the Swords, so he has a very good opportunity to get stronger. The Cradle of Swords, children born into the Baskerville family need to go through one trial. They are thrown into a maze of swords, and after going through that, they need to get to the Styx River to be examined for their talent. The Styx River is a legendary river that turns the body of children into iron. However, there is a limit to how many children it can affect. In order to get to the Styx River, you need to head straight out of the helix-shaped wall of blades, and Victor is currently in the process of completing this trial. In the past, he wasn't able to receive the blessing as he was ousted by his siblings and couldn't receive the effect. But this time, he is determined to get it and monopolize the Styx River's effect for as long as he can. As he made his way through the sharp swords, he quickly jumped into the river. He sank to the bottom, the magical water seeping into his body and bones through the cuts. Although painful, he was determined to stay for as long as he can, and endure all for the sake of his goals. On the surface, the servants became worried as he was staying at the river for an unusually long amount of time. Seeing this, Hugo laughed. He then asked the head butler, John Barrymore, how much time has passed. The butler replied that around 7 minutes has passed. Still smiling, Hugo remarked that he might die at this rate, but one of the servants pleaded for him to do something. And so, Hugo called to his son, stating that he may come up now. Victor heard him, however, he was determined to stay and absorb as much as he can. Taking things further, he sucked the water and decided to drink it. However, the water seeped into his lungs as he coughed and began to drown. As he drowned, all he could think of was to endure, and like that, he sank further into the depths of the river. Before he could fully drown, however, he was saved by Hugo. Picking him up with one leg, Hugo was surprised that he drank the Styx River water and sees that he even already has teeth despite being a newborn. So, he asked his butler for his name. The butler replied, stating that it was the young master Vicar van Baskerville. Hugo liked the name, as he smiled widely, commenting that there seems to be a very greedy son born into the Baskerville family. At the sight of Hugo, "Enjoy this as much as you can," Vicar exclaimed. For now, he needs to sharpen his canines silently, waiting for the right time to rip his master's head off. He vowed that the Baskerville family will disappear in history soon, by his, Vicar van Baskerville's hands. Hugo le Baskerville's bastardized son, Vivier van Baskerville. At 8 years of age, he was talented enough to be considered a genius, but he was considered ordinary among his family. At 20 years of age, he took on assassinations, espionage, and conquest type of missions. At 29 years of age, he had felt that he had reached his limit in swordsmanship compared to those in direct lineage. At 30 years of age, the gate to the demonic realm opened, marking the beginning of the demon clan's invasion. At 35 years of age, he endured through the era of destruction, slaughtering monsters left and right. At 39 years of age, the long war finally came to an end with the victory of the human realm. At 40 years of age, he was rewarded for his loyalty. The reward was defamation, false accusation, and the guillotine's blade. Vivier opened his eyes, finding himself in the same nursery, which means he successfully survived and absorbed the Styx River's blessing. As then, a maid comes into the room, holding a suspicious-looking chest laced with gold. The maid spoke to herself, wondering why the madam would want to place such a thing on Vicier's bed. Vicar saw this and was immediately alerted. She said it was from a madam, but no madam in the Baskerville family would give a present to an illegitimate son like him. The maid then placed the chest on his cradle, an ominous aura emanating from it as it slowly opened. Moments after, his suspicions were confirmed as snakes came out of the box. The snakes had shining red eyes and scales as deep red as blood. Hence, Vicar recognized it as bloody mambas, rare vipers that could deliver very potent venom. There are only a few people whom the servants would call madam in the Baskerville family, so Vicar concludes that they must be trying to reduce competition. The bloody snakes then made their way towards him, bearing their long fangs. But Vicar stood tall, then grabbed both snakes in the neck, each one caught in his tiny little hands. As expected of the Baskervilles, he thought. This marks the beginning of his revenge, as he'll crush the Baskerville family with his own 2 hands, just like these snakes. As then, he proceeds to squash the snakes as puddles of liquid splatter on his cradle. The next day, the people of Baskerville were shocked when they found the child sleeping peacefully next to dead vipers. All the nannies who were on shift that night were executed after being questioned, but the reason for the viper's appearance remained unknown. Only the young Hound knew the truth. 8 years later, the children were in a classroom. They were being taught about the levels of swordsmanship. If you cannot imbue the sword with mana, you are considered a sword beginner. The level at which you can imbue the sword with a little bit of mana is called sword expert. When the blade emits mana in liquid-like aura form, it is called a sword graduator. Lastly, the level at which the aura is solid and the form can freely change is called sword master. The strongest of the Baskerville, Hugo, is currently at that level. The other children were in awe, however, Vicar isn't paying attention as he was lost in thought. He was thinking about how he needed to regain his previous strength before the coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher saw him not paying attention, but didn't reprimand him, as he knew Vicar is much more talented than the others. In Vicar's thoughts, however, he was wondering how many years it will take for him to be able to kill Hugo. Moments later, we see 3 blonde kids with red eyes, seemingly triplets, looking in a certain direction. The person they were looking at was Vicar, pushing him and calling him garbage because of his middle name Van. They cornered him and asked if the rumors are true of him staying in the Styx River for 7 minutes and strangling 2 vipers as a baby. Vicar knew these 3 very well, as they were the ones who stabbed him when he was running away after the defamation. They're called the Hugo le Baskerville's Trident, Highborough, Middleborough, and Lowborough le Baskerville. The 3 continued to pester him. They're gonna be annoying in the future, so he contemplated whether to put them in their place now. As then, one of the kids, Highborough, pulled out a knife. He pointed it at Vicar and states that, if he really stayed at the Styx River for a long time, then his body is as hard as steel, therefore, he wouldn't die even if he gets stabbed. Highborough then ordered his brother, Lowborough, to choke him and see if he could really endure for 7 minutes. Lowborough thinks the rumors about Vicar were false and says that he'll eat his own hand if Vicar even manages to endure for 3 minutes. Seeing how cruel children could be, Vicar decided to play along for a bit. The other 2 wore cocky looks as they didn't believe the rumors were true. 3 minutes later, their expressions began to waver. But 10 minutes later, they were petrified as they realized the rumors were true. The 2 told their brother, Lowborough, to let him go, but before he could do so, he saw his fingers bleeding and he screamed loudly. Middleborough asked what Vicar was doing, and Vicar replied with his own question. He asked, didn't Lowborough say he'd eat his hand if it was true? He's just doing it for him. The two stood their ground, stating that they aren't scared of him. But Lowborough, on the other hand, was terrified as he just got his finger bitten off. They were gonna leave to get their brother treated, but Vicar stopped them, saying that he hadn't let them go just yet. Angered, the kid with a knife, Highborough, moved to attack, taking a stab at Vicar, asking if he forgot they were older than him. But his expression went pale as the knife didn't even manage to penetrate his skin. Vicar retorted to Highborough's question, stating that they're the ones who seems to forget that in Baskerville, power and talent overcomes age. He then grabbed the kid's hand, squeezing it as he states, let's keep playing till the end. Highborough was shocked as he came to the realization that everything about Vicar was true. Immediately afterwards, a fist hit him flush in the face as Vicar threw a straight. Middleborough and Lowborough wore worried expressions as their brother gets knocked out unconscious. Seeing this, Middleborough was angered, but before he could do anything, Vicar threw a roundhouse right at his head, causing him to also go unconscious. Only the terrified Lowborough was left. Vicar assured them not to be scared, because as soon as they get treated, they'll get better in no time. He then picks up the knife that Highborough dropped and states, it's just that it won't be anytime soon. Playing with the knife in his hand, Vicar told them that he'll be generous as he'll let one of them leave. The three were reinvigorated with hope as they questioned whomst amongst them will leave, and Vicar threw the knife in front of them, stating that they'll have to decide that for themselves. He then made his way towards the door, saying that they should decide quickly, after all, shouldn't at least one of them be alive, and implied that they would need to fight each other. Vicar then left the room, and afterwards, the three looked dumbfounded. But then, they realized their situation and looked menacingly at each other. Outside the door, Vicar wore a satisfied smirk, content that he managed to split the Triton of Baskerville. At the Baskerville estate, John Barrymore, the head butler, is talking to the patriarch about the Ruby Mines. He reported that there was a bloody situation with the Moore clan in the Ruby Mines, and that they are claiming that the Ruby Mines are their territory. Hugo, however, dismissed it, saying that an opportunity will present soon, as the Moore clan will seek them out first. He then asked if there is anything else to report. Barrymore complied and presented the matter of the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress, and that Vicar scored the highest on the written exam. Hugo smiled as he asked when the practical exam will be held. The butler replied that it will be held in 5 days' time. He also stated that the Guardian Knights have vacated the premises in preparation. Barrymore then raised another concern about the juvenile fortress as he reports that there's recently been a big fight among the young masters. Hugo was concerned, so he asked how many of them died, but Barrymore states that there was no casualties. However, Highborough's teeth were completely damaged, Middleborough's jaw has been smashed in, and Lowborough's left index finger was amputated. They've recovered their health since then, but the psychological damage that was done is a significant concern. Hugo concluded that they wouldn't fight among themselves since they're close, implying that there's someone else at play. And the butler replied that they had a conflict with another young master. The one who injured the three was the 8-year-old, Vicar, who scored the highest in the written exam, which surprised Hugo. Moments later, Vicar was called to the room as the father and son exchanged greetings. As Vicar greeted back, Hugo then questioned him about the 9-year-old triplets, stating that he heard Vicar had disabled them. But Vicar answered vaguely, stating that he believed they have already had proper medical care since then, trying to look as childish as possible. Hugo wasn't having it, and stated that he was not talking about physical disabilities, but a disability of the heart. Ever since that day, the three have been eating separately, and now they aren't even speaking to each other anymore. Hugo found their combination technique quite decent, but now their relationship is completely torn apart, so that technique is nowhere to be found. Hearing this, Vicar just gave an innocent smile as he stayed quiet. Hugo broke the silence, asking if he didn't think what he did was wrong. But Vicar questioned back, asking what exactly he did wrong. As far as he knew, this was the rule of the Baskerville family. He was stronger, so how can the stronger person be wrong? Hugo stated that he already talked to the three brothers beforehand, and they said that they will graciously forgive him, so Hugo asks if he still doesn't feel an ounce of guilt. Vicar smiled as he heard this, finding it funny. A past memory from before his regression resurfaced as he recollects just how ironic this situation is. In the past, the youngest daughter of a family that was ruined by the Baskerville came to pay Hugo a visit. She had become a nun after many years and told Hugo, "I forgive you," and offered a mass, and Hugo's response after that mass was, "I believe forgiveness is just an excuse made by the weak who cannot get revenge due to their lack of strength." Vicar quoted to the man who had said those very words. Hearing that statement, Hugo's grin stretched from ear to ear. He compliments Vicar, stating that he didn't think he knew the family motto so well. Because of this, he ordered Barrymore to take Vicar to the food storage, allow him to take whichever snack he wishes. However, it is only limited to as much as he can carry. Vicar innocently smiled as he asked if he could have chocolate, then thanked the patriarch. He walked towards the exit with Barrymore, but before leaving, Hugo called out to him. He told him to try and do well on the interim evaluation, and to not lose to the direct descendants. Vicar had a mixed expression as he replied half-heartedly. At the storage, Barrymore presented Vicar with various chocolates. However, Vicar states that he doesn't want anything processed. He states that what he needs are the cocoa beans. Barrymore was confused at first, but he still presented it to him. Vicar took a taste as one of the chefs explained what kind of beans they are. They are known as bloody beans, and with only a single bean, one can produce 100 liters of chocolate. Immediately afterwards, Vicar was taken aback by its bitterness. Barrymore saw this and thought that Vicar must have very peculiar tastes, but he applauded him for his genius, as he found a loophole to what the patriarch allowed him to take. With these beans, he could make all the chocolate that he wants and have room for more. As then, the chef asked Vicar if he wanted them to process it and send it to his room. However, Vicar replied that he'll take them as is. Vicar did not want the beans to eat. Instead, the bloody beans will be used during the practical exam within 5 days. And that day, a huge catastrophe would occur that has never happened in the Baskerville clan before. In this world, the Baskerville family is referred to as the Berserker family. The children from the family are put through a thorough early education. As soon as they're able to take their first steps, for their basic stamina, they need to run up a steep mountain. And except for the allocated times, they aren't allowed to lie down or be on their stomachs. When it's time to sleep, in order to adjust to tough environments, they need to sleep alongside a monster corpse. When that period ends, they are 8 years old and the young hounds will start their deadly evaluation. This is what caused the Baskerville family to be called the Berserker family, and right at this moment marks the beginning of the practical survival exam. In a mountain that's located on the outskirts of the territory, filled with monsters, the young hounds are gathered at the La Rouge-et-Lenoir mountain. The hounds are lined up, faced with the intimidating gaze of the instructors. The one overseeing the exam, the Baskerville family instructor, Shadow Dog, Pavlov van Baskerville. He then began to explain the contents of the evaluation. Their objective is to survive in the mountain for a month, all the while hunting the large and ferocious monsters. These two conditions are important in order for them to survive. The points for successfully surviving is 10 points. Surviving without becoming disabled is 30 points. Failing other participants and surviving will give them 50 points. Surviving after defeating a monster turns that to 70 points. And fulfilling all of the conditions mentioned is 90 points. Additionally, there are badges given to all the participants. If they manage to steal the badge from other participants, it will give them additional points. Obviously, if they die, then it's 0 points. There are no 100 points, as Hugo has the belief that a swordsman dies once he becomes too arrogant, and thus made the rule. He also explained where they are. They have their own designated safe area that they can move around in. The area beyond that, they are advised to not enter, as this mountain is a restricted area with many undiscovered things. During the exam, Guardian Knights will keep watch over them, all the while hiding and grading them. We then see Vicar included among the participants. The others gossiped as they saw Vicar. They wondered if all the rumors they heard about him were true. He got the highest score on the written exam, so they wanted to see if he could also do it on the practical exam. But Vicar, as usual, ignores the chatter as he is in his own little world. He's reminiscing about the past, stating that it's been a while since he's been in these mountains. Like the other participants, the triplets were also there. Seeing Vicar right behind them, they quickly moved to avoid his gaze, fearing a repeat of what happened in the past. It was then that the instructor pulled out the bell which will mark the start of the exam. Wishing the young hounds good luck, he swiftly rang the bell as the exam officially started. As they heard the chime, every participant swiftly scattered and separated into different directions. One of the participants moved in hopes of finding a more advantageous area, while another person followed him, hoping to take his points for himself. We cut to the triplets, seemingly not being able to get along and work together. They argued amongst themselves, as what Vicar did to them was still fresh on their minds. After the exam began, the instructor, Pavlov, laid back as he peacefully smoked a cigarette. In this exam, killing isn't prohibited, but it is not encouraged to kill others. If you kill someone, you will be deducted points, so everyone tries their best in order to not kill someone easily. And that's where the Guardian Knights comes in. They are there to keep the casualties to a minimum and prevent some unexpected situations. One of those Guardian Knights is currently hiding and following someone. It was Vicar, holding a stick and trekking through the forest. The knight was confused, as Vicar is seemingly going in the direction of the restricted area, so he wondered where he was going. In his mind, he questioned himself whether Vicar truly is a genius, and so he is looking forward to what kind of performance he'll show. Moments later, Vicar came upon a large tree. He surveyed the surroundings, then states that it's a good area to camp. Since he found where he'll be living, he decided to take a break and relax. This in turn caused the knight to be confused. As days passed, Vicar was peacefully gathering logs, a stark contrast to the others who clashed with their swords. He was quietly cooking when the others were struggling to fight large, ferocious monsters. He was calmly sleeping when everyone is trying their best just to survive. At this sight, the knight was dumbfounded. He asked himself how long Vicar has been digging a hole. And besides that, all he does is hunt for food and gathers equipment. He wondered if all he'd do is hide here and camp. He had second thoughts about the rumors of him being a genius, and since all Vicar was doing was camp, he decides that there's not really a point to observe him. And so, he left. Seeing him leave, Vicar smirked, relieved that the obstacle is finally gone. Camping like this made him reminisce about the past. In a flashback, we saw his old teammate who calls him leader explain that cocoa beans are used to make the fish smell and food less fishy. And among the beans, bloody beans are the best as they have a very high concentration of cacao. Back to the present, we see Vicar doing exactly that, tossing the beans into the fire of the food he's cooking. Now that there's no one to interfere and he's finished everything he needed to prepare, Vicar decides to proceed with his hunt. We see the thing that he's worked on for days, as the area where he was camping was filled with countless pitfall traps, with sharp, wooden spikes sticking out of them. A few days later, an ominous-looking sign was plastered on a metal fence. Inside it was Vicar, who ventured beyond the restricted area, ignoring the sign. From that point onwards, it's the unknown restricted area. But in the past, during his scouting days, he used to stroll casually in these woods. He smelled a burning smell and saw the burnt tree roots in his sight. So, he concluded that it's that monster's habitat. Immediately afterwards, his attention was taken by something. He saw the sight of a burning stool. He was ecstatic, as he found exactly what he was looking for. There is only one monster with such droppings. A monster that is eternally burning, a hellhound. It was a lookout monster that swallowed the hellfires of the oil world. The hellhound eyed Vicar as it got ready to attack. Alone, he was barely able to defeat one at the age of 18 in his past life, and now that he is 8 years old, it is even more impossible to defeat it alone. However, he knows a strategy by which even a child like him can win against such a monster. He swiftly charged at the hellhound as the hound does the same. However, it was only a ruse, as he then slid on the ground then quickly changed direction. He does this as the hellhound's first weakness is it can only move in straight lines. It is very slow while turning, so it finds it hard to change direction suddenly. The hound was confused as it saw Vicar doing something strange. Afterwards, Vicar pulled out a bottle of water and splashed it on the ground. A hellhound's second weakness is that lookout monsters are unable to cross bodies of water, even when the depth of said water is really shallow. And thus, he spread the water in front of him in order to create a small obstacle for the hound. The hound tries to avoid the puddle as it charged at Vicar, but it was slowed significantly as it isn't running in a straight line. This in turn exposes another weakness common to all canine-like monsters, running with their mouths open agape. When the hound was in front of him, Vicar pulled something out of his pocket. He then threw it in its open mouth, and the hound missed its charge as Vicar swiftly dodged its attack. The hound got ready for another charge, but before it could do so, it felt that something was wrong. Immediately afterwards, the monster suddenly fell. As it turns out, what he threw were the bloody cocoa beans, a type of chocolate, which in turn acts as a poison to all canines. And these so-called bloody beans are one of the most potent of its type. With just one bean, it could make 100 liters of chocolate, so it's quite obvious what it can do to the canine monster. He then uttered, "I guess even the hounds of hell can't win against chocolate," while pulling out his sword. The monster isn't dead yet, and so Vicar moves to end its misery. He can't stab it in the heart due to its hard ribs protecting it. So, he needs to aim for a weak spot not protected by the ribs. And that weak spot is an area with no bone protection, the kidney. He stabbed the monster, subsequently killing it. He then pulled out his sword as a mysterious blue energy comes out of the carcass. In this world, when you hunt monsters, an energy called XP or mana accumulates in the body, making it stronger. He swung his sword, noting that it seems to have gotten lighter. He commented that at the rate he was going, he'll be able to catch up to his strength before his regression, before even coming of age. He wonders what kind of face Hugo would make when his 8-year-old son brings the corpse of a monster with a risk rating of B+. With this kind of monster, he's basically secured first place, and he's already decided what kind of reward he will ask for. A reward which he could never dream of having in his past life, something the value of which is unknown in the current era except for himself. Vicar then moves to take the hound's head, but notices something approaching. He looks, only to find the terrifying sight of a pack of hellhounds coming his way. At this sight, he remained calm as he moved his sword. With one swing, he severs the dead hound's head. he turned to the others, commenting that he never planned to just only kill one anyways, remarking that he has plenty of beans left for every single one of them. But then suddenly, a massive aura released as the hellhounds becomes alerted and terrified. Looking at them, Vicar was confused as they were seemingly submitting to a mere 8-year-old's bloodlust. He knew hellhounds wouldn't submit to their prey even if they were to die, as then he turned. Facing him was a monster similar to the hounds, but its aura and fire is blue and it had 3 heads. As he got a closer look, Vicar realized it was the 3-headed hound, a monster that has a risk rating of a Cerberus. Vicar was baffled, as this monster should be in the 7th habitat. This is currently the 1st habitat, so Vicar wondered how it got here. But then, looking at its body, he saw that it was bleeding. It has multiple arrows stuck onto its body, along with other similar wounds, so he concluded that someone must be trying to hunt it. He remembered something. There was a tribe of barbarians right across the mountain, so it must be them that chased it here. If so, then this is his chance, as an injured A+ rank monster would be severely weakened. There was something that Vicar was hiding from the very start of this exam. He hid his power at the Baskerville estate, when in truth, he had already reached the realm of sword expert and has mastered the Baskerville's 3rd technique. He had reached a level that the others would reach only when they turn into adults. Thus, without fear, he swiftly charged at the 3-headed Cerberus. He swung at one head as his sword clashed with it. But the other head came from his side, trying to bite down at Vicar. Luckily, he was able to react quickly as he slashed back at it. Seeing that he was able to keep up, he concluded that he could do it. In his previous life, Vicar had refined his swordsmanship by fighting with the Demon Clan. It was to the point where he was able to get rid of unnecessary movements in his technique. Added on to that, in this life, Vicar had been strengthened by the Styx River, so all of Vicar's current weapons are working well against the injured Cerberus. But it was a false assumption. In a blur, the Cerberus hit him by his side. He tried to block with his sword, but it broke from the impact of the attack. He let his guard down. He was too focused on the heads, but its claws were the weapon that sent him flying. He was flung to the nearby tree, hitting it, causing him to cough up blood. Vicar sat still, seemingly unconscious. As then, he was jolted awake, confused about what just happened. He sweated profusely as for a moment he lost consciousness, which could have been fatal. The Cerberus walked menacingly towards him, trying to finish what it started and kill its prey. Vicar felt intense pain in his left arm, so he wondered if it has been ripped out. But after taking a look, he saw that it was only something minor which he could recover easily from. The Cerberus was wounded, but to think that it only dealt insignificant damage, Vicar could not comprehend it. So, he concluded that it must be because of the effect of the Styx River. Ending his thoughts, however, the Cerberus once again pounced. Vicar, avoiding the attack, narrowly dodging by a hair. Although the wound may not be that serious, he still took some damage. So, he is afraid that he won't be able to take a second hit. This is an unexpected situation, a difficult voyage some may say. But in being an experienced hunter, he must adapt and find the best solutions to these kinds of situations. And right now, faced with such a strong and bloodthirsty monster, the best possible decision that he could think of is to run with his tails tucked behind his legs, like a scared little puppy. If it weren't for the injury the Cerberus had, thus being severely weakened, he would probably be ripped apart by now. So he joked that he should thank the barbarian tribe that's over the mountain. He ran as fast as he could, the Cerberus closely following behind. He ran for his life, hoping to get over the fence through the safe zone and out of the restricted area. If he can get to the place he prepared at his camp before, then it's his win. But if he gets caught before then, he'll die and he could say goodbye to his wish of getting revenge on the Baskervilles. He hopped over the fence, the 3 heads of the Cerberus looming under him as it tried to make chase. He ran as if his life depended on it, desperately searching for the area where he last set camp. As then, at the corner of his eyes, he finally found the area. Only a little bit more, he thought, sweating profusely as he hastened as quickly as possible. The gigantic silhouette of the Cerberus loomed over his shoulder as he tries to find the right timing. It was then he reached his destination. Immediately afterwards, he did a front flip. But while in midair, the Cerberus managed to catch up to him. And as the Cerberus was going to bite his head off, it stepped on something, making it lose footing. It sank to the ground, and at the same time, Vicar hit the ground from his flip. He breathed a sigh of relief as the Cerberus was successfully caught in his trap. As then, we see the Hound being skewered on sharp, wooden spikes, which Vicar calls the Cradle of Swords. This was the same trap that he spent most of the duration of the exam laying out. These traps were meant to be for hellhounds, but he didn't think a Cerberus could be caught in it. Because of this, the wooden spears were laced with the essence of the bloody beans. So, who's to think it wouldn't work on the Cerberus? They're the same species of canid monsters as the hellhounds, so the essence should still act as a sort of poison for it. The Cerberus was greatly affected by the poison, causing 2 of its heads to shut down. However, it still didn't go down as one of the heads still stood strong, refusing to die. Vicar saw it wasn't backing down easily, and so he quickly took action. In his right hand, he held another spear, taking aim for the last head of the Cerberus. In the next moment, Vicar threw the spear with all his might, zeroing in on the mark. The trapped Cerberus could only hopelessly watch as the spear reached its head. The monster lets out a last, loud, and desperate roar. At this sight, Vicar started counting in his mind, as if waiting for something. Each time he counted, he took a step towards the Cerberus. Finally, at the 7th step, he comes face to face with the Cerberus as it seems to shake uncontrollably. Immediately afterwards, the light in its eyes also lost its glow, just like its other heads. He wiped his mouth as he breathed a sigh of relief. After all this time, the job is finally done. Looking at its carcass, he remarked that it's exactly 7 steps, just as the rumors said. You see, the spear he threw wasn't normal. It was laced with poison from the bloody mamba's venomous fangs. And with this toxin, it is said that it won't let you walk more than 7 steps once you've been bit. Luckily, he had gotten and hid some from the snakes he killed as a baby, which proved to be useful in the current situation. As he was the one who killed it, he felt the energy of the Cerberus come rushing in. He was in a predicament as he wonders how he will carry the massive carcass. Since its death was fairly obvious, he thinks that the guardian knight who saw him carve his spears will probably serve as his witness. But there's something else he needs to do. Since Cerberus are gatekeepers of their territory, means the dungeon it is protecting must be nearby. Dungeons are mysterious places that harbor treasure, and sometimes powerful monsters use them as their lair. Since the protector is now gone, the dungeon will probably be empty. And now, he spreads the feces of the Cerberus on his body. He does this as with the Cerberus feces, he could avoid battle with the smaller monsters in the dungeon, as the scent of the Cerberus alone is enough to deter them. With all the tracks left by the massive Cerberus, he would then be able to track its dungeon by the route it took in the forest. Moments later, he found himself at a huge, dark opening. It was the dungeon that the Cerberus was guarding. As he walked through it, he recalled being here before in his past life. This dungeon will only be discovered in another 10 years, and is going to turn out completely empty. Right now though, it's not, as he can sense the mana underneath the rotten surface. So he was sure it hasn't been cleared yet. He looked through the dark tunnel. There was no light inside, it's deeper than he thought. At this, he smirked, wondering what kind of treasure he will find as he heads into the dungeon. As he heads deeper, he surveyed the dungeon. He found veins of ruby minerals surrounding the area, so he concluded that it must be connected to the Red All Mountain. As then, at the end of the long dark tunnel, he saw a light that has a reddish hue and color. He contemplates whether it was the real entrance of the dungeon. As he got closer to the light, it got more and more intense, causing him to block his eyes with his arms. As he arrived at the source, he was greeted with an ancient-looking room, and a red ruby at its center sitting atop of a small pillar. He found that mana is imbued in the ruby to emit light. Curious, he made his way to the gem, hoping to closely inspect it. When he was near it, he noticed something. Someone was here before him, as what he saw leaning against the pillar was a dried, musty skeleton with a letter beside it. He examined the skeleton, concluding that the injuries seemed to be from stabbings, and there are also dried brown bloodstains. He then picked up the paper next to the skeleton. The paper reads, "It doesn't matter what my name is, I'll just call myself Cain. There's no need to dirty this pure white paper with my name." Seeing this, Vicar deduced he's also a Baskerville, as this seemed to be the handwriting of one. The text continues, "I write this so that the future generations will not make the same mistakes I did. This stone chamber has been talked about within the family for ages. My brother, Abel, and I coincidentally came across this place, and we raided this dungeon, which consisted of countless of trials. We killed many monsters and came to this chamber to find the final assignment of this place. That assignment tied our feet here for a very long time, 3 years. Vicar questioned why they wanted the treasure so bad they'd justify spending 3 years getting it. He also concluded that the final assignment the letter was talking about must be in here, and deduced that it has something to do with the gem. There seems to be writing on the pillar holding the gem, and the text on the pillar reads, "When entering it's 1, but once inside it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. This text is also mentioned in the letter as Vicar continued to read it for more information. My brother and I contemplated over this ominous text forever. In the end, we came to a conclusion. My twin brother and I were one in our mother's womb, but when we were given birth to, we were separated into 2. In other words, in order to take this dungeon's treasure, we needed to become one once again. That meant that only one of us could leave with the treasure. After a fierce battle, I ended up killing my own brother. After that, there was only one left in the stone chamber. Despite that, there was no change. We definitely went from 2 to 1, so why couldn't I take the treasure? I killed my brother, I killed him. After moments of regret, I decided to leave this place. I want to tell those who were brave enough to find this place to leave immediately. That there's nothing to gain from this devil's den that only serves to taunt humans." After reading the letter, Vicar had an idea about what happened. They came all the way here after after many challenges, but left empty-handed. There's one detail that doesn't add up though, it's that Vicar doesn't have a twin. But the assignment remains the same, despite not having a twin of his own. Which means the two brothers, Cain and Abel, must have misinterpreted the text. Vicar racked his brain as he thought of answers to the text. He tries to find links and connect the dots with the information that he's found. As then, looking at the skeleton, he realized something. It's all coming together now. He then made his way to the ruby, stating that Cain and Abel were simply unlucky. Because they came as two, they could not solve the problem as they came with a fixated idea of what the assignment is. The answer was actually pretty simple, and all of it lies in the very dungeon itself. When entering the dungeon through the dark passageway, being illuminated by the light from the ruby casts a shadow, making him two. As then, he suddenly punches and breaks the ruby, causing it to shatter. With this, the darkness returns, and he becomes one once again. And thus, the answer to the riddle is shadow. Vicar smiled as he saw the cause of the two brothers' death. What lays before him was a sword, with a red and black aura releasing from it, the relic of the Devil's Den. The sword looks to have 3 glowing eyes at its hilt, and its blade is really thin, causing it to look like a mosquito's needle. There was writing beneath the item reading, "Only those with Baskerville's blood will be able to take Beelzebub." At the mention of this name, Vicar was surprised. He recalled seeing an illustration of a picture book once in his childhood, with the same name of the gluttonous fly, Beelzebub. It was an unprecedented monster that invaded the continent in old legends. It is part of the Devil's holy constellations, also known as the 7 calamities. In order to stop them, the family heads of the 7 families stepped up to take on a Devil's constellation each. The constellation that the first patriarch of the Baskerville family fought was the gluttony Beelzebub. The remnants of Beelzebub is said to be stored in the land of Baskerville, and his demonic energy was said to have lured out monsters. It's an old legend that nobody believes, but that legend was true, and this blade was taken later by the demon clan, causing countless deaths among humans on the battlefield. However, Vicar vowed that it won't happen in this life as it's now in his hands. He tried to pull the sword, the pressure causing shockwaves throughout the room. But then, a dark red surge of energy emanated from the sword gathering on his right arm. Slowly, the energy started to disappear, but suddenly, the energy burst forth once again, forming a blade. This was the blade made from the corpse of a Devil's holy constellation. Seeing the sword in his hand, Vicar states that he's excited to find out how much stronger he'll be in this life. After getting the sword, he thought there was nothing else for him to obtain, so he decided to head back. But then suddenly, he felt dizzy as he fell to the ground. He thought he was only dizzy, but in fact, he is hungry because the sword is asking him to eat. His stomach was churning for food, and because of it, his sense of smell was heightened. As then, the sword pointed at a certain direction. Upon arriving, he saw the corpse of the hellhound that he killed earlier. Immediately, the sword proceeded to stab and drink its blood like a mosquito. After absorption, Vicar's state is reverting back to normal as he wondered how much he needs to consume to feed this sword. After its meal, the sword reverted back satisfied. We then see its stats as it seemingly absorbed the skill of the hellhound and putting it on the first slot. It also has 2 more slots which are not filled yet, making it a total of 3. Beelzebub, the glutton of flies. It is said to possess the power to absorb the opponent's skills as their own. Since the absorption amount was nearly infinite, countless people are said to have lost their abilities and turned obsolete. But due to it being in a weakened state, it can only absorb 3 abilities right now. After knowing its ability, Vicar had a sudden idea. At the Cerberus carcass, the sword was going to devour it whole, but Vicar stopped it, saying that if it's too damaged then he wouldn't be able to explain how he killed it during autopsy. It was still noisy, so Vicar slapped it to shut up, making it revert back. The skills he absorbed thus far are, in the first slot, Burn Injury from the Cerberus, rank A+. At the second slot, Hemorrhage from the Hellhound, rank B+. Finally, at the third slot, High Speed Regeneration from the Norvegicus Sewer Rat, rank F. He wondered how he got the high-speed regeneration skill, but then he saw the rat buried beneath the Cerberus. Vicar was very satisfied because he was able to get the burn injury skill from the Cerberus. After all, the sensation of being burnt alive is one of the worst things a human could experience. Now that he's done preparing the monsters to submit for the exam, he decided to just wait there. Days later, after the trial, the young hounds, whose practical examinations were completed, returned to Baskerville. Afterwards, the respective evaluations followed suit. The young hounds received a shield, sword, or necklace as a reward, made from monsters they hunted during the exam. But one of the monsters that a young hound has hunted, astonished the Baskervilles who were present. At the news, Hugo asked Barrymore who caught that monster. Barrymore replied that it was Vicar, who accidentally crossed over the restricted area and hunted the A+ rank risk rating Cerberus. Hugo asked how he managed to do that, as even the family guardian knights tend to avoid that monster. Barrymore replied that the Cerberus was wounded by the barbarian tribe, and that he had applied poison to his spear. Hugo asked what kind of poison would be able to kill a Cerberus, and how a bastard like Vicar managed to obtain it. But even Barrymore didn't know, as there is nothing more written on Vicar's report. He tried to ask Vicar, but he didn't say anything, stating that he'll be returning to the dorms as he was quite tired. At this news, Hugo was satisfied as he compliments Vicar on how sly he is. Barrymore commented that even he was surprised that a young master named Van and not Orla is so talented. But Hugo apprehended him, saying he's different from previous patriarchs. When he raises a hound, he doesn't discriminate based on their bloodlines. Whether they are from a line of whores or royals, it doesn't matter as long as they have talent and spite. Of course, that also means that there are talentless mutts coming from the royal bloodlines. Barrymore thinks he's referring to his second son who's preparing for isolation training. So, he apologizes. Hugo brushed it off, saying it's fine. But he will need a mood booster, so he ordered Barrymore to go summon Vicar. Moments later, Hugo questioned Vicar on how he was able to hunt the Cerberus. Vicar replies that it was due to chocolate, explaining that it is a lethal poison to canid monsters. Hugo then asks why he didn't respond to the butler properly when he asked him about the hunt. Vicar replied resolutely, it's because he isn't his master. At this, Hugo smiled, then asks who is his master. Vicar replied that since he belongs in the clan, then his master is the master of the clan as well. Hugo was pleased by this statement, saying that he's learned well. Since Hugo was satisfied, he gave ownership of the carcass of the monsters he hunted to him, and additionally will grant him a wish as a reward for getting the highest score. At this, Vicar was ecstatic, as he will finally be able to get what he wants. His request was to gain access to the Thousand Epistle Library, one of the largest library in the Empire located at the heart of the Baskerville clan. At this request, the two were startled. Hugo then asks if he's aware that only the Patriarch and second in command, along with their direct descendants, are allowed to access it. Hearing this, Vicar thinks he's been rejected. I guess I'll have to sneak in, he thought. However, moments after, Hugo spoke once again, telling him that he may enter. He also especially remarked that Vicar should read the Baskerville's 6th technique, located in the 6th restricted zone deep inside the library. Vicar was shocked, as the Hugo he knew from his previous life wouldn't allow an illegitimate child with the middle name Van access past the 4th technique. He calmed himself down, as it was only the 6th technique. There were other more powerful techniques out there. Hugo's currently cultivating the 7th technique, but in the past, he was much stronger, as he was able to bear all 9 fangs of the Baskerville technique. Vicar hasn't forgotten the life of discrimination as an illegitimate child, so in this life, he swore to surpass even Hugo himself. To achieve that, he needs a certain item, the greatest essence of Baskerville. It was the textbook of swordsmanship containing the teachings of the first patriarch who was able to subjugate the 7 great disasters. And Hugo Le Baskerville will be the one to hand that over to Vicar. Hugo then wished him luck on his journey to the library. Vicar replied thanking him, saying he'll be sure to surpass his expectations. Moments later, 2 guards were guarding a door to some sort of room. As then, the footsteps of a person came and rang throughout the hall. It was Vicar, making his way inside the Thousand Epistle Library. It was his first time being allowed inside here, so he was awed by the interior of the library. He delved into the shelves, meticulously sifting through the books with his hands. The covers of the books read, Severing Incisors, Grinding Molars, Piercing Canines, Snaggletooth that embeds twice, and Wisdom Teeth that lay down. All of these are swordsmanship books for the Baskervilles, and in his past life, these are the books that he so desperately wanted to read but couldn't. No matter how much mana they had, an illegitimate child of the Baskerville cannot be allowed to learn swordsmanship that is superior to the 4th technique. It is done in order to ensure that the Baskerville's pawns, in other terms, the hounds, don't bare their teeth towards their master. As then, he came upon a book bound by chains, with a lock and a keyhole in the middle. To think Hugo would willingly offer Baskerville's 6th technique to him, Vicar was truly confused. If it was in the past, never in his wildest dreams would he think this would happen. But of course, he knew that Hugo probably did so, thinking an 8-year-old child would not be able to memorize its contents. Before regressing though, he memorized the 1st till the 4th technique, all in order to deduce the contents of the 5th technique that he wasn't able to gain access to. So, he already has an idea of what lies in the 6th technique. As he reads the book, he came to finally realize why he couldn't attain the 5th tooth in his past life. It was because after drawing the 4th tooth, he needed to stop the flow of mana in order to draw the 5th. For the Baskerville swordsmanship, depending on the stage of the sword, 1 tooth represents the 1st technique, 2 for the 2nd, and so on. When you draw teeth, a special trait, a red sword aura, appears. After knowing this, Vicar quickly skimmed through the book of the 6th technique since the real reason he came to this library was different. It was for something much higher level than the 6th technique. The guards were surprised, as Vicar already came out of the library. They told him that the swordsmanship books are much deeper in the library and that they can go get it for him. But Vicar replied that he already finished what he came for. Hearing this, they told him that he could stay a while longer and look around. Vicar replied that he'll do exactly that, so don't worry about it and go do their own thing. As he left, the two gossiped as Vicar is seemingly going to the section filled with only miscellaneous books. Vicar ignored the chatter, leaving them to think whatever they want. After all, they don't know that among these old musty books lies a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. His eyes darted from shelf to shelf as he searched for it. As then, he picked up on something as he found what he was looking for. It was an old, dirty, and wrinkled book. On the cover of it reads, "A Lurking Ambush." He was ecstatic as he was sure this was what he was looking for. It was a book on the basics of the first technique that many of the Baskerville children don't read. It was because the book had many ripped pages missing, so they thought it was a useless miscellaneous book. But Vicar knows exactly just how valuable this book is. In the past, in the Hound squad he was assigned to, he found a relic inside the dungeon bordering the La Rouge et Lenoir mountain. It was a page from a swordsmanship textbook, a ripped single page. And on the page was a Baskerville's handwriting written on it. Hugo, who found this fascinating, ordered a search through the whole library trying to find the book that matched the missing page. And what came from that search was the swordsmanship book, A Lurking Ambush. This is a book where the ancestors of Baskerville wrote, and this book contains the secret to the Baskerville's 10th technique. And Hugo, who found this out, released the hounds in search of the 6 other remaining pages that were missing. In this search, Hugo found out that the remaining 6 pages were hidden in the 7 great families. And so, he declared war on the other families and sent the hounds to get the pages. After the sacrifice of many hounds, all the pages came into Hugo's hands. The reward for doing all that was a simple, monotonous, "good job." Remembering this, Vicar was pissed, stating that it was a stupid life. Because of this, Hugo broke through the 7th technique and attained the 9th technique, all in turn of a pile of hounds' corpses and blood who died in vain. Vicar vowed to not let that happen in this life. After all, the hound who found all of those pages was him. And he remembers all of the contents written on those pages. The only reason he wasn't able to get past the 4th technique was that he didn't have access to the original book. But now he does. As he reads the book, he found that to a normal reader, this book really seemed like trash as it doesn't make any sense. However, as soon as you fill in the blanks with the missing pages, everything starts to make sense. He reached the highest level of graduator aura and the 4th technique before he regressed, so before he turns 15, he wants to reclaim the power he had back then. The night sky outside the window gradually brightened as dawn approached, signaling the arrival of a new day. He has been reading for an entire day, so he thinks that it's enough. Thanks to that though, he was able to memorize the entire book. He stood up and couldn't sense the presence of the guardian knights from before, so he decides to do a little testing. He couldn't achieve the 10th technique just yet with his current body, but he feels that he could now probably achieve the 5th technique that he wasn't able to attain in his previous life. Vicar then released his aura as he imagined an imaginary opponent in front of him. He gathers the aura in his hand as he prepares to attack. He then swiftly moved, performing the 1st technique and taking off the imaginary opponent's head. He goes through the other motions, the 2nd and the 3rd, ripping apart his opponent's body with vicious strikes. As then, he performs a distinctly more powerful swing, the 4th technique. However, he isn't done, moving to attack once more. His previous life was pathetic. After working hard, he was able to achieve a high level of graduator aura, but he wasn't able to learn a suitable sword technique as the people of the direct bloodline were hostile towards him. There was only one reason why he couldn't get past the 4th technique. It was because he was born an illegitimate child. He doesn't want to live such a life. As he moved to attack his imaginary opponent, its visage suddenly changes. As he got closer, he imagines the opponent's face overlapping that of Hugo's. As then, slashes of red cut the visage of Hugo. Vicar goes through his opponent, the silhouette of which is cut to 1,000 pieces and bathed in the color of red. Landing swiftly, Vicar caught his breath. Although a bit weak, he was able to draw the 5th tooth, in other words, the 5th technique. Realizing this, Vicar was overjoyed to the point that he could cry. He looks around dumbly, wondering if he could find a sword to test it out. For those of you confused about this man was power rankings and cultivation levels, here's the sheet of the ranks and what they equal. Now, let's continue to our story. He finally reached the 5th tooth, and as long as his mana can support it, he will be able to reach the level that he was at before he regressed. He smiled widely, as it seems his mana capacity also increased and he has reached another level. Now in his hands was a liquid-like aura form, a sign of a sword graduator. He had gone from a high-class sword expert to a low-class sword graduator. He only reached this point when he was 30 years in the past, so he can't believe that this time he reached it at the young age of 8. Sword graduators are on a completely different level from sword experts. The solid aura turns into liquid aura, simultaneously increasing its density and allowing it to be used more freely. His swordsmanship is also higher now than in the past. This time, he won't be stuck at just the 5th technique, as he now has a sword technique that could reach the 10th tooth. The sword technique he learned in his previous life, the piercing fang. Although with it, he could get stronger in a shorter period of time, it comes at the cost of many limitations. On the other hand, a lurking ambush, the one he has now, is a perfect sword technique that could smoothly transition between offense and defense without limitations. If push comes to shove, with this technique, he might be able to challenge a mid-rank graduator. He'd have 100% chance with assassination, and 50% if he faced them head-on. The only problem now is how much power he should show to Hugo. He can't show too much nor can he show too little. He needs Hugo to have something to look forward to, as then, he pulled what seems to be a small lens out of his pocket. He put it on the window where the hot ray of sunshine is shining, and focused the lens on the book, setting it on fire. With that, Hugo and the hounds will have no clear path to reaching the 10th technique. That of course excludes him, as then, the guardian knights from before came in where Vikir was, wondering about the burning smell. They saw Vikir in the remnants of the burnt book, so they questioned him about it. Vikir acted sorry and apologized, stating that he accidentally left the magnifying glass and burnt the book. The two bought his act, stating that there's no need to apologize as it's their fault for not looking after him properly. They're just glad it was just a useless book and not the relevant ones. They are busy with the ruby mines, so he doesn't think they have the time to be dealing with small problems like this. So Vikir reassured them of the fact it was just a useless book and nothing more. The two replied that if that's so, then it's fine. If Vikir would keep it a secret, then they would do so as well. Afterwards, Vikir then left, saying that now it's a secret between them. The two conversed with each other, saying how nice of a person Vikir is and that he deserves to be respected. Vikir, on the other hand, wore a satisfied smile as he managed to achieve his goals flawlessly. At Hugo's office, Hugo questioned Vikir about his journey to the library, asking him if he had enlightenment. Vikir replied sort of, as Hugo smiled hearing this. He then told him to relay what he learned in the library. At this question, Vikir replied vaguely, saying that he felt something warm and sharp, yet soft and vicious. Hearing this description, the two was surprised, Barrymore questioning if it is aura. You see, having aura is a sign that you've officially entered the world of the sword. Even geniuses would have to train endlessly until the age of 15 before they could reach the level of low-class sword expert. Hugo calmed himself, thinking that there's no way an 8-year-old like Vikir would have aura. Little did he know, Vikir has already long passed that level. With that, Hugo asked Vikir if he could show him exactly what he learned. Vikir smiled innocently and said of course. At the arena in the Baskerville estate, crowds of children gather to watch. On its ground stood Vikir, standing calmly with a smirk on his face, holding a shiny steel sword. Hugo watched the spectacle unfold on his seat, with Barrymore by his side. Barrymore asked what exactly he'll do to test Vikir's prowess. Hugo replied that he's planning on releasing a monster for him to fight. As then, a loud sound rang through the arena as metal fences holding the monster opened, and facing towards it was Vikir. We then see the creature that he was facing. It had a humanoid muscular frame, green skin, and red eyes. It was wrapped and bound in chains, which one of the guardian knights guided it by. It was an orc with a risk rating of C. Seeing this, the children watching worried, stating that this is overkill for an 8-year-old, as one needs to at least be 15 to handle it. Vikir and the orc came face to face, the monster towering over Vikir like a tall mountain. As then, Hugo waved his hand to signal the fight to start. Free from the chains, the orc released a deafening roar. Vikir got ready as the orc charged forward. Before it could reach Vikir, however, its arm was stopped, as it was cleanly cut by Vikir. The orc was shocked, as it didn't think Vikir would be able to do something like that. But before it could ponder, Vikir once again attacked. He targeted its legs, as the orc fell to the ground and lost its balance. The orc was very confused, as it was probably the first time it experienced bleeding. Orcs have a distinct skill that allows them to regenerate. But, since it's only a C rank skill, the B+ rank hemorrhage from the Hellhound bypasses it. The skill hemorrhage makes the opponent's wound to never stop bleeding, so it's a very deadly skill. Seeing this spectacle, the spectators were confused how an 8-year-old is so strong. Hugo, however, still had a stoic look. Seeing this, Vikir decides to step up the pace and show him what he wants. As then, Hugo and Barrymore was startled at the sight of Vikir. What Vikir did was release his aura and make it coat the blade, an aura blade. The orc got up, as the injuries it sustained before wasn't fatal. But before it could do so, the red aura surrounded it, as Vikir dealt the final blow. Hugo was taken aback as he saw what Vicar just did. Barrymore congratulated him as they had just witnessed the birth of a genius. He stated, among all the families in the Empire, he doesn't think there's another genius that could match Vicar. Interrupting him, Hugo told him to stop. Orcs are known for their regeneration, so he thinks there's something wrong with it. Therefore, he stated that Vicar only won because that particular orc is weak. As he was saying this, however, he was smiling from ear to ear, so Barrymore thinks why Hugo couldn't just express his happiness. Interrupting them, Vicar spoke. With his usual innocent smile, he asked if there is anything stronger than the orc. And this will be the end of the manhwa for now. If you liked the video, do consider leaving a like, as it will let me know if you guys want a part 2. And also, do consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell, as I would be posting more content like this. That said, thank you guys for watching.